Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. What a weird name. Who would have foreseen that this franchise, which spawned from a tiny little indie comic about walking, talking turtles, would have spiraled into one of the biggest franchises out there? They've had their own brand of ice cream, stage shows, a truckload of video games, and too many shows to count. Whether you're a fan of the cheesy as hell 80s series, the more serious attempt with 2012, or enjoy a true blue action comedy with Rise, there's a Turtles era that everyone loves. So it's safe to say that they would also get their hands dirty in the realm of movies. And that's why I'm here today. 7 movies, all with their own style, feel, and time period they were released in. All of them having their own positives and flaws. It's time we take a look at them. Welcome to...
Where did they come up with this stuff?
You might think you do, but you don't know.
It's the 1990s, a time of super soakers, pizza bagels, and where anyone would pay for a product if it had the Ninja Turtles slapped on it.
It's right on the tip of my tongue. Oh, don't tell me. It's. Oh, I know.
Time's up, I'm sorry.
Cowabunga, you moron! You retro reptile.
So of course, around this time, the first feature film would premiere to massive success. After more than a decade, is it still as good as it was back then? Yeah, it's pretty great. Keep in mind, this was the 90s, a time where the first Tim Burton Batman film was just out a year prior, proving that comic book adaptations with the right people behind it would lead to not only a great product, but big results as well. When talking about what the film gets right, casting is one of them. All of the turtles have their personalities from the cartoon, albeit with a few changes. Both Mikey and Donnie are considered the comic relief instead of being Raph and Mikey, with Mikey being the lighthearted goofball and Donnie being the quick-witted wise guy. Apparently this was changed in order to make them stand out from each other, and I think it's done pretty well here, considering that future incarnations of the Turtles would have this dynamic too. All of the Turtles work really well off each other here. They bring that sense of humanity to these characters. Like, I know they're supposed to be these larger-than-life creatures, I mean, they're walking, talking turtles, but they act almost like they're human, emotion and all.
Splinter's out there somewhere!
I know Splinter's out there. Fight?
Fight.
Kitchen?
Kitchen.
Yeah.
This even reflects in their designs. Leo's the leader, so he's made to be the thinnest and tallest. Raph's the muscle, so he has the body with more muscles and wear and tear. Mikey has the more lively facial expressions, and Donnie has his face often with a permanent smirk. Continuing with the casting, Judith Hoag plays a great April O'Neil. You get the feeling that by the end of the first act, she's gotten to really know the Turtles and is actually their friend. She's got that humanity that ties the whole group together, but isn't too afraid to make a joke or a wisecrack here and there. And, being honest, there really hasn't been a better live-action April than her after this movie.
I don't know, Charles. Did you know that Mae Williams over at Channel 5 has her own office?
You can have an office.
Yeah, well, she has her own corner office.
You can have a corner office.
Well, but she's also one of the highest paid field reporters in New York City.
Now you are.
You are a tough negotiator, Charles.
And then we have Casey Jones, the New York bruiser who doesn't care for the justice system cause it's broken, and takes matters into his own hands. Lovingly brought to life by Elias Koteas, he perfectly fits that pig-headed personality I've seen Casey have, and even has great chemistry with April, which unfortunately didn't go anywhere with this being a trilogy and all, but for when he's here, he does a great job.
Now, you guys mind telling me what you're doing with my little green pal over there?
A lot of reviewers seem to skip over this movie's interpretation of Splinter, and being honest, I have no clue why. Splinter in this movie seems like the base for all incarnations of the character. He's a wise old master always ready to spout cryptic words of advice, but is also prepared to crack a joke or two during the film. He's even the reason the good guys win in the end. His wisdom's not just for dialogue's sake either. There's some really well put together lines he has that establishes how much time has changed him. This one line especially gets me. It's at a part of the film where he meets Danny, this one kid working for Shredder. In the midst of Danny's struggle, Splinter offers these words of encouragement.
Some say that the path from inner turmoil begins with a friendly ear. My ear is open if you care to use it.
In my mind, this is Splinter. An endless waterfall of wisdom, a being ready to lend a hand, or in his case paw, to anyone he sees as not evil but just lost. But the aspect that takes the cake in this movie is just the fleshed out and mature script that it has. It heavily focuses in on the seedy underbelly of New York, where our antagonist Shredder is taking advantage of the troubled youth in the city, recruiting them to become kind of a silent league of thieves. The film's plot shows a great dichotomy between our main characters and our villain. The army he has aren't just some nameless men or robots like the 80s sitcom, but teens who are just in the headspace of being completely alone. The Shredder entices them with speeches about the outside world rejecting them, essentially warping their minds with what he wants them to think. It's even brought up later in the film, which is a great touch.
We have a loyalty to the Shredder.
The Shredder uses you. He poisons your minds to obtain that which he desires. He cares nothing for you or the people you hurt.
The part of the film where the whole group is on the farm is an example of this. It's something that a lot of reviews about this movie don't go into detail with. Here we see the different points of view of each member of the group and how they react to the circumstances they're put in, finding someone to rely on, putting blame on themselves, and having to adapt. It's little touches like that that make this movie a joy to watch over and over. And a big part of the film is Splinter preparing the turtles for hardships without him around. And we see how our four heroes handle the situation at hand, with Mikey taking it the hardest in the film. There's a scene where Donatello asks Michelangelo what he thinks of Splinter's words. At first it looks like he's completely ignoring the question, but later on in the film, when he's the only one crying at the relief of Splinter being alive, it's shown, not through words but through visuals, that he was in denial about the whole thing happening. The people behind this film weren't trying to make brainless mush, but a well-crafted, well-choreographed, well-told story that could remain timeless. And speaking of choreography, this of course leads me to one of my favorite aspects of the movie, its practical effects. In a time before green screens and CGI became the norm, there was only certain ways to get certain parts of a film done, and this was through either animatronics, makeup, or puppetry. A great example is Roger Rabbit and his dueling piano scene, which took real blood, sweat, and tears to get perfectly. For TMNT, it took highly trained martial artists along with puppeteering in order to make the mouth movements feel real, all with the help of the Jim Henson Company. What's seen on screen is the result of all these things working together almost perfectly. Sure, you can see some slip-ups here and there, but for the most part, the effort shows. But perhaps the most interesting thing about this movie is that no big studios wanted to make it. Weird, right? Arguably one of the most profitable franchises of the last few decades, and no one wanted to produce its movie? It's because of that the first 90s movie is actually an independent one, that newcomer at the time, New Line Cinema, picked up way too late in the filming. And for a while, it was the biggest indie film out there till Blair Witch dethroned it 9 years later. Pretty interesting when you think about it. When talking about faithful adaptations, TMNT is a prime example of it being done well. With an almost perfect cast, the perfect amount of inspiration taken from both the comics and cartoon with its darker tone, and great strides in filmmaking, this remains to this day the best attempt at a live-action TMNT film we can get. And it's really a blessing I get to talk about this first, cause trust me, for the next 2 segments, we got nowhere else to go but down.
And remember, go ninja, go ninja, go!
I'll come out and say it. Secret of the Ooze isn't a bad Ninja Turtles movie, just a really unfocused one. This one goes for more of the cheesy, goofy feel of the 80s cartoon, with lighter colors, slapstick, puns, weird, dancing, and really outdated 90s references.
You know, these nets are remarkably effective. Very well constructed.
Yeah. Remind me to drop a line to Ralph later.
It feels like a step back from the story the first film was trying to tell, and the final movie here seems like the byproduct of complaining parents and studio meddling. Like, when your main characters are supposed to be fighting their enemies with weapons that they have, seeing them fight with yo-yos and sausages makes it feel like someone slapped a PG sticker on the screen and hoped no one would notice. This one was heavily toned down. Due to, like I said, complaining parents, the turtles' weapons are glued to their holsters, replacing the ninja fighting with scenes more akin to something from the original 80s cartoon. It sucks cause this was one of my favorite parts of the movie, knowing that the motions in the fights were being done by tons of people, and this kinda makes it feel like a downgrade compared to the last movie. We still have the expert puppeteering done by the Jim Henson Company, and even if we don't have most of the actors back like Donnie and Raph, the sound likes to do a good job at replicating the original performances quite well. Instead of bringing back Casey Jones, we have a new character that goes by the name of Kino, a martial artist and pizza boy that bumps into the turtles at the start of the film. I can see why he's here at least. He has some good lines in the movie and works with the turtles really well. He's not a bad choice for an addition at all, even if we did end up losing Casey.
Dream on, dweeb.
Yeah, okay. But when I do, I'll dream of something a little thinner.
And speaking of bringing back characters, we have the Shredder who kind of turns into a laughingstock this movie. We somehow went from a villain who ruled through control and propaganda, warping the minds of troubled youth till his very end, to him getting taken out by a guitar solo.
Yeah!
And then a doc.
Shredder, you gotta listen to reason! Yeah!
And in the end, it just kind of feels like he's there to fill in a villain role, but fails at it. When I say this movie's unfocused, I mean it's really not sure of what it's trying to be. At times there are scenes that have the energy of the first movie, and at others it looks like it's trying to delve heavily into being a recreation of the 80s show at the time, which isn't even a bad idea if that's what you're going for, but it takes those ideas only so far so many times that the movie ends up being a half-baked mess. Like they want to have two mutants that work for Shredder. Great, but not Bebop and Rocksteady. No, Toka and Razar. So what we get instead are two plus-size mutant babies that don't even do anything with the screen time they're given, like they're there for jokes and nothing else. Even the whole story's half-baked. Apparently the secret of the Ooze, you know, the substance that gave the turtles their origin, the reason they exist, just turns out to be some waste from TGRI instead of TCRI. And they end up getting rid of all but one canister in the end anyways. You can really tell that different visions were meant for this one, and what came out of it was a hodgepodge of different tones and styles that when put together just kind of end up making a movie that's a real letdown. It's not one of the worst movies out there, like I'd put it on if I was bored one day, but when thinking about what could have been, it just kind of leaves a sour taste in your mouth.
Yo, dude!
Huh?
Yo, dude! Just like Elvis in Blue Hawaii.
It's really sad how these movies went from quality filmmaking to being forced out factory style every year just to make a profit. And because of that, we have the actual worst movie of this trilogy, Turtles in Time, not to be confused with the video game of the same name. This one's a giant mess to begin with. To start off, the Jim Henson Company didn't come back to do the puppets for the Turtles. Instead, the job was outsourced to somewhere called the All Effects Company. These look really rough, like worse than the Out of Our Shells costumes, and those were obnoxiously bad. But these are insultingly bad. The lip flaps aren't synced to the voice performances, and it's obvious that they half-assed a lot of the movie. It's unfortunate because you can tell the actors are trying their hardest to make this work, but the costumes and writing isn't doing them any favors. The story's nothing to write home about either. For a movie called Turtles in Time, they go to a total of one time period. Yes, really. It doesn't take full advantage of the comic it was based off either. Issues 8 and 9 have the Turtles meeting Renee the Time Mistress. It involves them traveling back in different time periods and fighting Cerberus. How you go from that to just feudal Japan, I have no clue. When the video game and future cartoons do an infinitely better job than you know you messed up somewhere. Even the ending of the movie had me confused. They established that Raph and Mikey want to stay and start new lives there since people seem to accept them, but they go back not because they realize they're needed in NYC. No, that would actually be a good ending to the movie. They go back simply because Leo, Donnie, and some of the other characters say they have to. Yep, quality filmmaking there, folks. Turtles in Time is what you get when you utilize a franchise just to make money. There's no effort in places that there should be. The second one at least had a genuine attempt to juggle different visions. Sure, it didn't do it the best way, but I could see the intention. This one? This is just soulless. Like, this isn't even fun to watch with friends and make fun of. Thankfully, this one didn't do nearly as well to warrant a fourth one. A good thing too, cause I don't know how long the franchise's time in movies would have lasted if this was the quality they had. It was pretty obvious that the Turtles were in need of a new team to take the reins. Something fresh, new, and maybe animated. And over a decade later, that's what we got.
And there ain't no bad guy or monster gonna ever change that. That's what's important. And that's why we'll always be brothers.
Oh, I love being a turtle. Great balls of fire. Guess who just crawled out the Mother Maya that can make you trust a motherfucking liar?
And now we've reached what's considered the black sheep of the TMNT movies. I mean, everyone remembers the 90s trilogy, and gives them their flowers time and time again. But this one, in just the last few years, started getting looked at seriously, which is always good. Imaji's 2007 flick has a lot of history behind it, covered in depth by a lot of channels. But to not make a word-for-word clone of these scripts, I implore you all to check out the video by Rebel Taxi about the topic. He does far better justice than I can ever do on it, so go check it out. The movie takes a bit of a different approach when compared to the last few films we covered. It's not a reboot or reimagining of the Turtles, it puts us smack dab in the middle of their story, focusing on Leo returning home after spending a year training on his own. I don't think 07's intended to be a sequel to the 90s movies, but there are bits and pieces that allude to it. From heavy implications that the Shredder's been gone for a while, to references to the trilogy and the original comic. I really like the feel of the story here. We've seen multiple examples of the Turtles meeting April and defeating Shredder, but it's here we see them kind of at the end of their glory days and trying to find that spark that came from them being a team. Nothing's patched up right away. They're rusty, they mess up, they argue. and a good chunk of the movie spent on this, which I applaud. In terms of style, TMNT definitely makes an attempt to stand out. I love the darker direction it goes for, with harsher shadows and lighting. Keep in mind, this was 2007, a time where studios were still experimenting. Meet the Robinsons and Ratatouille came out the exact same year, and even then, Turtles, despite coming from a smaller studio, looks like it could fit right at home with modern movies now. Something I appreciate in this iteration of the Turtles more than any other movie is that they got actual experienced voice actors for this and not just some random celebrities. Here we have Nolan North, James Arnold Taylor, Mitchell Whitfield, and Mikey Kelly as the Turtles, clearly giving it their all to make them sound unique. The performances as our four leads act perfectly as a contrast to other celebrity performances like Sarah Michelle Gellar, Patrick Stewart, and Chris Evans, who looked like he was trying to bag every movie role for a comic book film at the time. Like, did anyone notice this? Scott Pilgrim, Fantastic Four, and this? I'd even go as far as to say he could have made for a good live-action Casey if Captain America didn't take off. Given what we got in the Bay films, I feel like he could have done a much better job than what we ended up with.
Guess it comes from growing up with a house full of brothers.
I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm just saying that if it was my brother, I'd find a way to work it out.
TMNT is not flawless, not by a long shot. A lot of the story can be really inconsistent and make no sense. Along with the story of the Turtles, we get this other one that feels like it was meant for another movie, focusing on this night guy who, in an attempt to become immortal, uses this ritual that happens every 3,000 years, but even when he succeeds, it backfires, leaving his brotherhood to turn to stone. Even if the story were to sound remotely interesting, there's so many holes in it. Like, why did Winters wait this long to just now hire the Foot Clan to hunt down the rest of these monsters? Why were these monsters around New York in the first place? And how come the Turtles didn't notice them until now? And even then, Winters isn't even a bad guy. He's trying to right his wrongs and die peacefully. So then, why is he even a threat? It kinda feels like they wrote the Turtle stuff first, which was fully fleshed out, and found out last minute that they needed a villain, and this is what we got. TMNT might not turn heads, but there was an attempt to make a different story from the Turtles media we got, with a director who looked really passionate about what he was trying to make. It's sad that this was one of the final nails in the coffin for Imagi Studios. Knowing what they were trying to put out, it felt like they were dealt a bad hand at the end of the day. And in today's climate, it feels like they would have done far better. So long, Imagi. You weren't number one, but you definitely get an A for effort.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles will return after these messages. We now return to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
What are you?
Well, miss, we're ninjas.
We're mutants.
Well, technically we're turtles.
Oh, and we're teenagers.
We all knew we'd get to this one eventually. The Bay Turtles, which is what most people have known them as, follows the Avengers trend. That being that someone saw how big the Avengers got and decided to structure every movie after it in order to get the same audience. And most, if not all of the time, those films bombed. I wonder why. What hasn't been said about this version of the Turtles at this point? It's been dragged to hell and back. The designs are ugly as sin, the story's contrived as hell. A lot of the times the actors look like they don't want to be there, except for Will Arnett as Vern, which, being honest, I just like him because of BoJack and nothing else.
Princess Carolyn, look! I met John Stamos.
That is not John Stamos!
Being honest here, this one's more of a harmless fly in your face than what most people painted it as. We live in a post-Sonic movie world, and that design was god-awful. Sure, making them 7-foot-tall giants that make a thud with every step isn't exactly where I saw the TMNT going, but I mostly see it as experimental. Despite trying to be another obvious Transformers type thing, I feel as if most of the hate sort of died down after Nostalgia Critic and them made their videos on it. Like, this one seems more like an April O'Neil movie than anything. For the most part, we follow her trying to be taken seriously by anyone with an actor that clearly only did this for a paycheck. And most of the time watching, people are just waiting for the ugly CG abominations to get on screen. Even the plots got me scratching my head a bit. Apparently the Shredder's giant plan to take over New York is to use the mutagen to make people ill and then sell the antidote at extortionate prices. Okay then, don't be misinformed here. They didn't direct any of these movies. but they sure do as hell have a lot of his DNA. Lens flares, explosions, the CG characters are always moving, doing front flips and other stuff like that, and overall just kind of have a feel similar to the Bay Transformers movies. Even the characters don't feel the same here. Like, did they have to have Mikey be such a lug-headed frat boy that acts like a pig all the time? TMNT 2014 kinda looks like a crazy cobbled together mess of a film writing-wise. I know a lot of changes were made mid-filming, like adding another shredder to trick people into thinking that he was the bad guy this whole time, but it was pretty obvious it was meant to be Sax. I actually forgot that I saw this in theaters for a while, and I can really see why.
Guys, we got something no one else has.
Garbage truck!
Garbage truck?
The other we do have the other one. Okay, the other one.
Turtle power!
Never change, this is Jay every day.
Out of the Shadows, not to be confused with the video game of the same name, feels like an upgrade from the 2014 movie. How big of an upgrade? Well, it depends on who you ask. For one, the turtles look a lot better this time. There's no intention of making them massive hulking monsters with bulletproof shells and super strength, and they actually have more simplified designs. Almost as if people saw how they first looked and decided, yeah, let's try and fix this. And I guess they did to some degree. Mikey's lines aren't nearly as annoying as the first one, and I really like how they made Donnie the slimmest of the group here to make them more unique from each other. I will say this though. This does feel like the most divisive of the Turtles movies that we got. Much like the second 90s movie, it seems to want to take a lot of inspiration from the 80s series, with Bebop and Rocksteady as enemies, Shredder and Krang actually working together, and the Technodrome being an actual threat. Does it do these well? Kinda? Like, don't get me wrong, I think it does the whole 80s series inspiration leagues above Secret of the Ooze, mostly because they didn't have to build off a great movie with a crappy one, but most of the time it feels like it endlessly teases audiences with these elements. I still think that this is way above 2014 for me, even down to the celebrities they get. Like, do you remember that Whoopi Goldberg was in the first movie? Tyler Perry actually does a good Baxter Stockman, even though they don't utilize him in the best way, and this is the only movie where I've seen Uncle Ruckus as Bebop and Seamus as Rocksteady, and I actually like them here. They're hilarious. And on top of all of that, we actually get another live-action Casey this time, and he's decent. Not good, not bad. Stephen Amell seems to be trying his best with this one, and there was a kind of change with him being a security guard trying to be a detective, but honestly, he doesn't hold a candle to the 90s Casey. A lot of the movie's based on spectacle more than anything. Do you want a Turtles van with giant mechanical nunchuck arms? You'll find it here. You want the Technodrome being built towering above New York? You got it. You want the Turtles fighting Bebop and Rocksteady on the big screen? Here it is. These are great, but I really wish they were utilized a lot more for the movie instead of them being a one and done deal. Then again, I guess 50% is better than 20%. Out of the Shadows stands as honestly a good attempt at trying to save a franchise. Make no mistake, I'm not calling it amazing, but with every other bad Turtles movie I had to sit through for this, I wouldn't mind popping this in a second time.
Poster shot, someone's getting fired.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached it. The final of 7 movies, what I consider the best this franchise has to offer in terms of storytelling, animation, and emotion. Rise of the TMNT, the movie. A little history lesson. Back in 2018, Nickelodeon premiered a new iteration of the TMNT, right after ending their flagship 2012 series, one known for its strong characters and writing. Obviously knowing the internet, they decided to throw every ounce of hate at it. And later on, the show just kinda kept going. That being, until its finale. This got many people's attention, and especially the news that it was going to get cancelled right after. But fortunately, we got hope. In the form of a movie intended to cap off the series. People raved about it to no end, the hashtag Save Rise of the TMNT was everywhere, and the hype was huge for this one. But now, a year later, does the film warrant all this? Yeah, I'd say it does. 2022 was a great year for the Turtles in general. Not only did we have a great movie from Invincible producer Seth Rogen on the way, but we also got the game Shredder's Revenge that proved that this franchise still had a lot of lasting power with it if the right team was behind it. And with this movie leading the charge, I'd go as far as to say that we're in a better place in fandom culture because of it. It brought a lot of people together and somehow changed people's viewpoints on the series as a whole. This for sure has to be the darkest of the TMNT movies so far. From its cold open, we see a ravaged New York overrun with robots. Half of the team is either missing or dead. We even have Michelangelo, thought to be the goofball of the group, up and die trying to help make a time portal and save the world. It's really eye-opening what the team behind this intended to do for its main characters. The movie is mostly a chance for us to explore the last adventure for these characters. There's a lot of tension throughout most of the film, with Leo having to take charge and lead his group throughout what's considered their biggest challenge yet. They're going up against villains that for once they can't just wave their magic weapons and win against, but they use everything they have in order to save the day. The Krang are just some goofy villains. They're an actual threat. and almost seem unstoppable. The things they do to their victims, both hero and villains, make for some real horrific imagery for an animated movie. Yeah, some people say animation's for kids. Hey kids, do you want to watch a movie where one of the characters has a panic attack on screen? Or one of them gets stabbed through the shoulder? Or vaporized on screen? Yeah, only for kids. This one has such a feeling of finality to it. There's some great moments between characters, especially Leo and Raph, where one's trying to take his responsibilities more seriously. Fight scenes take center stage for this one, with the final battle against Krang being a personal highlight. And of course, we can't forget the series' trademark animation carrying the movie throughout its runtime. This is truly one of the best movies this franchise has to offer. No contest. And just like that, I've reviewed every TMNT movie as of now. The Turtles as a franchise seems to be one that has a lot of lasting power. They've been through good, bad, and even mediocre outings over their history. And with new movies like Mutant Mayhem, I'm really excited to see where we go next.
Looks like it's gonna be a great day today to get some fresh air like a stray on a straightaway. Hey you, got a light? Nah, a Bud Light. Early in the morning, face corruption like a mud fight. Looky here, it's just the way the cookie tear. Prepare to get hurt in angle like Kurt Angle rookie year. The rocket scientist with the pocket wireless. Some even say he might need some psychiatrist. Doom, are you pondering what I'm pondering? Yes, why would the darn thing be wandering? She's just a foundling, barely worth fondling. My posse's on Broadway like mama, I want to sing. Mad plays the bass like the race.